where I go, people secretly and sometimes openly want to know how I can afford to travel year round. While I've spent over a decade traveling, I'm not even at the halfway point of seeing all 195 countries. However, there are quite a bit of people who have visited every country in the world. I plan to talk to all of them, asking them the sacrifices they've made to see every country, what were their favorites and least favorites, their craziest experiences, tips on how we can travel more, and yes, how they can afford to travel nonstop. I'm Kevin Liu, the host of the Pick My Adventure show, and I'm glad you're ready to hear what it takes to be one of the world's most traveled. Hey everyone, I'd like to welcome Gunnar Garfors to the show today. Gunnar, thank you very much for joining us. Gunnar has been to every country not once, but twice, and you are the only person to do that in the world, as far as I know. Let me ask you, does your family think that you are crazy for traveling so much?
Well, I don't know if I have any family left, actually. They're no, they kind of gave up on that. Especially my mom. She was trying to, talk me out of traveling to certain countries, and then, I still travel there. But so she kind of gave up on that. But no, it's very important to me to meet my family as often as I can. They live in Norway. I have quite a big family, the three brothers and three sisters, plus my parents. So and also a girlfriend as well. So no, it's very important for me to meet them as much as possible, either at home or to travel with them. So it's you should never forget about people close to you. I think that's very important.
Sure. So, how many days of the year are you on the road?
Oh, that varies quite a bit, but yeah, typically between I guess 150 and 200 every year. Currently, I'm living from travel. I write travel books primarily and do presentations around the world. So yeah, so everything is sort of based on travels. So needless to say, I'm yeah, not in Oslo very much, let's say.
Sure, sure. And is your girlfriend also in Oslo, or where's
Yeah,
she
she
based?
is. She's actually Finnish, Irish, American, Sudanese. So
Wow.
you can say she can travel. She loves to travel as well. Currently, she's in Oslo, um, but she used to live in Sudan. And because of the war there, she had to she just had to flee, as a lot of other people. So that's a bit difficult. So the circumstances are not ideal. But currently, she's here in Oslo with me.
Well, can I ask, like, I know being on the road so much, traveling, it can not be conducive to a typical relationship. How is it that you guys met, and how does your relationship function when you're on the road so much? Do you spend a lot of time traveling together as well?
Yeah, well, coincidentally, we met at a conference for extreme travelers in
Hmm.
Yerevan, Armenia, and both of us we were speaking there, and we kind of hit it on, and I pretty much instantly fell in love. And so since then we've traveled quite a bit together, both in Norway and I think in quite a few, over 20 countries, as well. So, I have some projects and she has some projects, and then we also try to travel together quite a bit for let's say common projects or just common travels. So sometimes she takes the lead, sometimes I take the lead, and the rest of the time we just fight about where we should travel. So no, it's great.
Yeah, no, that is really great. It's a very ideal situation because I find when I'm traveling, it's very hard to meet someone that's very compatible, right? I mean, they don't always have the ability to pick up and go and travel somewhere, but also there's the problem of how they're financing it and how you actually can work together and travel. For me, I find the difficult thing is sometimes the people that I meet traveling, maybe they're traveling for 3 or 4 months and they don't really have one foot in the real world. Whereas I always say that I have like one foot in the real world where I work, I make money, and then I have one foot in this hippie nomad community. and I try to do the best to balance both of that out. Um, how long have you guys been together? And do both of you make your money, make your living on the road? Is it through travel?
Yeah, well, I work as an author and, let's say, a speaker. So it's all based on travel. She's working in education. Due to the war in Sudan, she lost her job. Her employer had to sort of also leave the country. So yeah, but currently she's looking at various opportunities in education. She's been traveling quite a lot and been working from wherever she's been in the world on the road. She's had a job where it's been possible to do that within educational strategy and so on. So yes, we're sort of we're a good fit when it comes to travel, I would say. And even though we have totally different, let's say, uh, what should I say, paths for income. But we managed in each our way to work a lot on the road, and also the styles of traveling together. It matters quite a bit that you don't get too annoyed at each other, and you kind of manage to find common interests and go to places both want to go to, or at least compromise and so on. So yeah, we've been lucky there. We've been together for almost a year now.
Oh, good, good. That's good to hear. I always like to hear about these perpetual travelers finding love because a lot of times that can be very elusive. I think a lot of travelers that I've talked to, they have had they have bypassed romance or love, marriage or kids in order to accomplish this goal of seeing every country. Can I ask you what made you want to see every country in the world, not once but twice? Like the first time around, when did you decide I want to see every country? And then second time, what made
Yeah.
you say, let me do
No, I
this
think
again?
I started traveling alone. I mean, without my family when I was 17. I went on Interrail by train around Europe with a friend, and that really appealed to me very, very much. And then in 2004, I um, I went to the first Stan countries. I went to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan with my brother Øystein, and I just totally fell in love with the Stans, and I decided to go to every Stan country in the world. And a few years later, I finished all the seven stans, and then I kind of wanted to have another goal, let's say a travel goal. And then I decided to visit every country in the world. By then, I'd been to around 80, I think, or 85. Um, and then in 2013, I finished all 198 as I count. And then I promised myself I'm never going to do anything like this ever again, because you really have to go to this country and this country and this country, even though you want to go to a different country, but you have to kind of finish that list, if you like. And then I started writing a book or researching a book about the least visited countries in the world. And the UN, or the UN's World Tourism Organization, they have a list, but that doesn't cover every country in the world. So most countries that don't have many tourists, they don't report numbers to this particular list. So I had to find the numbers myself by interviewing hoteliers. I had to interview people in the airports, in ports, the police officers, custom services, and so on and so forth, in order to make the complete list. And finally, I managed to get the numbers from all 198 countries. And in the process of doing this, of course, I had to visit all these countries that are least visited, or not many tourists go to. And for some reason, I just started counting. So, how many countries have I visited at least twice? And I realized I was only missing 25 or 30. And I don't know. Then I kind of challenged myself. Say, okay, screw it. I'm going to finish off those 25 or 30 countries for the second time. So it kind of came out from book research, and then just randomly counting, and then say, wow, that sounds like a stupid idea. So I'm I don't know. I have quite a few strange ideas, and way too often I kind of follow through with them. So, and then when was that? 2018, I finished every country for the second time.
Okay, so do you display obsessive compulsive traits in other parts of your life? I mean, it sounds like it's just, hey, like you always want to finish something or you want to be the first to accomplish something. Is this something that in other parts of your life that are rampant?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, when it comes to travel, that's very important to me. And I feel I've learned so much from travel. I met so many truly incredible people. I've learned a lot about a lot of the countries, about the cultures, about food, about religions, and so on and so forth. I've also learned a lot about myself, not least from actually sort of observing the Western world or the Western bubble that a lot of us are fortunate enough to live within, and seeing this privilege that we have, that we're actually able to travel, and then also observing how so many of us just take this for granted, and we meet so many people from the poorest countries in the world, and we just we're being invited to parties maybe or weddings or whatnot, and we don't really care or even to ask about their situations or whether they would like to travel maybe. And I met this guy from Costa Rica, and he was asking me a lot about travels and different countries and everything. And he said, "Gunnar, this is really incredible to listen to. You know what? I wish I could also travel to foreign countries. And I don't have a passport to do that. I don't have the money. I don't think I can ever travel to a lot of countries, especially not outside Central America. But I really wish I could do that." And that really struck a note with me, and that really got me thinking. And I said, of course, a lot of people think this way. They're welcoming. They're so nice to a lot of travelers and welcoming us into their homes and showing them around. Um, Even though they know that maybe they will never be able to travel themselves. So I think travel if travel doesn't humble you, I don't think anything does. And I really think that we should appreciate this privilege we do have, having strong passports, having decent incomes, having time off to travel, living in democracies with decent infrastructures and all the rest of it. So traveling and seeing a lot of the world has hopefully at least given me that insight, and seeing that Western bubble from the outside is quite valuable as well, I think.
That's a really good point. I mean, I meet a lot of people, and they are so very friendly all across the world. And I remember being out in Ukraine a few years back before the war, and one of the guys I met there came from Turkey, and he was talking about how, and I ended up partying with him for a few days, but he talked about how there's limited places that he can go to, and in terms of how much he makes in Turkey. So it was like basically Ukraine or Thailand were some of his preferred places. He couldn't get into the EU. There's just so many places. Norway has one of the strongest passports. U.S. has a very strong passport as well, but it is disheartening because I want people to be able to see more of the world, see other countries and the realities for other people from what they make in their local environments. It just doesn't afford that a lot of times. Um, can I ask about the book that you wrote? The 20 least visited countries. What is that book about, and what did you learn from spending time in those environments?
Yeah, I was so I'm sort of counting down, and I'm doing the 20 least visited countries, as you say, the least visited, and this was before the pandemic, so the numbers have changed a tiny bit, but it's sort of a snapshot of, let's say, previous normality, and I assume that the numbers will be pretty similar after the pandemic is totally over. I mean, we see North Korea is still closed down, so currently North Korea is the least visited country in the world. Whereas in my book, it's not even among the top 20 because they get quite a few Chinese tourists. So I think they're number 34 or something on the list. Also, last year, Turkmenistan was closed down, and various other countries. So this again was before the pandemic. traveling to these countries, and to me it was, yes, of course I needed to find numbers of how many tourists were visiting, but I also wanted to meet like normal people uh, and speak to them, and there are so many incredible stories there, very strong experiences, tragedies, funny stories, and all the rest of it. So it was sort of a dive into local communities in these 20 countries. Although I also did research in some others, because I didn't know which 20 countries we'd be talking about until I finished all the research. So I think actually I've made the first complete list of tourist numbers to every country in the world doing this book. It's called Elsewhere. It's coming out. It's coming out in on a UK publisher, Broken Sleep Books. It's called in September this year. So it's going to be out with a lot of photos and everything. It's a really beautifully done book, and I didn't design it, but there's really a skillful designer that did. It's also out in Hungarian of all languages. So what I learned, I don't know, it's a tough question. I met so many different kinds of people. It was from everybody from aid workers and teachers to doctors, transport workers, fishermen, and all the rest of it. And you sort of get an insight into their lives. And I'm trying to explain as good as I can, how they're getting by in their countries, and how they're looking upon travel, and maybe why. Also touching upon why there are so few tourists to coming to their countries. All 20 countries are on 3 continents. Most of them are in Africa. A few are in Asia, and I think there are 6 countries in Oceania. So it's typically war-ridden countries. So they've had some famine or other disasters. Or they're remote islands that very few people here even know about, islands with no tourist budgets or marketing budgets, and also very poor infrastructure, few planes that fly there. So there are typically these two categories, and then you have Turkmenistan, which is sort of just a very strange country with it's almost as strange as North Korea, let's say. But not quite at that level. But other than that, it's kind of in its own category.
Can you tell me a little bit why Turkmenistan is such an interesting or unique place or unique country?
Well, they used to be part of the Soviet Union until it broke up, and then the president, let's call him a dictator, was given complete powers. It's the 5th biggest gas exporter in the world, which means they have loads of money. So he sort of took all this money and abused his power, and put up more than 600 white marble buildings, high rises in Ashgabat, the capital. He built statues of himself in gold. He changed the names of the days of the week and named them after his family members and friends. He did the same with the months of the year. He made all books in the country illegal, except from one book that he had written himself, and so on and so forth. So it's just very, very different to almost every other country in the world. And I mean, North Korea is in a league of its own, but this is very surreal. And I mean, in Ashgabat, with all these marble houses, they're beautiful, but they're too expensive, so almost no people can afford to live there. So it's sort of a ghost town in the middle of the capital. Although you have 12-lane roads, with almost no cars. So if you want to experience Ashgabat, then you have to go to the outskirts, where you have the more traditional, let's say, Soviet Union-style buildings, really grey and boring high-rises. But that's where people actually, live their lives. They go to the parks, they play outside, they go drinking, they go eating, and all the rest of it. So it's just a surreal experience to go to Turkmenistan. It's also one of the very few countries in the world where you actually need a guide to go as a tourist. The other two are North Korea and currently Syria. So Bhutan used to be another one, but they have abolished the absolute need for a guide, so you can actually travel without one.
I think Bhutan just incorporated a $200 per day tourist tax, I believe. But Turkmenistan, the way that you describe it sounds incredible because for me, I think the more that I travel, the more I want a culture shock. I want something to kind of just shock my senses from the norm. And hearing about a country like this just sounds like every day you just learn about something unique and that's completely different than any other country that we might know of. But yeah, that's definitely great to know. Now, on that line, can I ask you what are some of your favorite countries that you have visited and why?
But this is a question I get typically, I don't know, 10 times every week in one form or another. And I can never really answer this question because I think there are so many amazing countries out there, fantastic countries with wonderful people. So to sort of rate one in front of another, I can't really do that. There was this American magazine a few years ago. They asked me about the same thing, and I said, "Well, no, I can't really rate or give you the best country or rate a number of countries, but I'll give you a list of 12 countries that I can recommend everyone to visit." But there's one precondition here: you cannot rate them. You cannot say 1, 2, 3, and up to 12. You just have to list them. But of course, this was a magazine, so the article had to start somewhere, and I picked two countries from each continent, each of the six inhabited continents, and in Europe, one of the countries I picked was Romania. And that was the country that put at the top of the article. And within one day, every radio station and TV station in Romania called me and said, "Oh, you're saying Romania is the best country in the world." And I said, "No, no, that's not exactly what I meant." And said, "Oh, that's amazing. So why do you think so?" So I kind of just gave up and I just played along with it. So in Romania, people think I people think I find Romania the best country in the world,
Yeah,
even though I'd sort of instructed them not to not
sure.
to number them. I mean, I'm really a big fan of sceneries, nature. I also like, let's say, happening cities with good food, with nightlife. Um, but it's really hard to pick one or even 10 or 15 countries and sort of rate them. Also, it kind of depends on how long you've spent in a country. And often I see the opposite. People say, no, no, they might not have a favorite country, but they have a least favorite country. And if you ask them, say, why is that? And say, no, no, I had food poisoning there and I was robbed. And I say, of course, but that's not because of the country. You were unlucky, perhaps. So maybe give it another chance instead of just knocking it and saying it's the worst country in the world. So I don't know. I really can't come up with good answers to such questions. I just think it's you can find wonderful things in every country in the world. And of course, there are always downsides. It might be racism, it might be sexism, it might be dictatorship, it might be politicians. It might be a lot of corruption or pollution. I mean, there might always be downsides, but you always find wonderful things as well in every country.
Sure.
But then
Yeah, I
it's
understand.
to us as a traveler, to us as travelers. So our goal should really be to find those gems or
Yeah.
find those good qualities of every country, and then kind of look for them instead of trying to find faults of each country.
Well, it's true. I get a lot of people who ask me what country they should go visit, and I always have to ask, well, it depends on what you're looking for. And I hesitate to give people advice on my favorite countries because nowadays they tend to lean towards the country where there's no tourists. And that's not always the best for other people. They want to go to places that they've seen on Instagram, or they want to go to places where 20 of their friends have gone to and they've seen the pictures from the Greek Isles or from Thailand. And so I always try to preface it that way. Well, let me get into a little bit more of like what your style of travel is. Are you staying in hostels? Are you staying in hotels, Airbnbs? How long are you staying everywhere? And what's your ideal of a great day in a new city, new country? Well, for you, there would no longer be new, but back in the day.
Well, there are always new places in almost every country. I mean, maybe with the exception of Nauru and the Vatican and some very small countries. So I always try to visit new places, or of course, sometimes I have made friends that I want to revisit, and so there are always new places you can see almost in every country. With regards to where I'm staying, typically cheap hotels or hostels. Also use sites such as couch surfing to stay for free on somebody's couch. It's a great way to meet someone who actually lives in a country and to get expert advice on what to see and what not to. I think too many people are relying on guidebooks instead of talking to the real experts, and the real experts are always the people who actually live in the city or town or village or whatever that you're actually visiting. I typically a good day for me is to go out to explore. It's about feeling the vibe. It's about meeting people there. It's about trying local foods. So it's about being out, and that also is sort of connected to the reason why I'm not staying much in hotels, or especially not nice hotels or expensive hotels. I mean, I'd rather spend my money on exploring a place. And in a hotel, typically you don't really meet that many people. Might have a nice room and all the rest of it, and a beautiful balcony and maybe a good view. But I prefer to rather spend my money out and about, and explore and experience the place properly. So the Airbnb I also use on occasion, or other sites where you can hire a flat. It depends on how long you're staying, really. If you just a night or two, a hostel or a hotel is typically more convenient. Whereas if you're staying longer, you like to have a kitchen and be able to at least make breakfast and stuff like that. When it comes to how long I'm staying, that totally depends as well. When I'm doing book research, the longer the better, really, because you're depending on getting the stories and sort of digging deep. So I guess on average, I've stayed between 7 and 10 days in every country. But yeah, it totally depends. Um, the countries such as the Vatican, you might not want to stay too long in. It's not
Right.
too much to see there. It's the only country in the world without a hotel. So there I had to stay on the ground outside on the pavement
Yeah.
to be able to stay overnight. But I guess that's the country I've stayed the shortest in for good reasons.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say that it doesn't count unless you stay a night in a country. So the fact that you stayed a night on the ground in the Vatican was a dedication for sure. So let me ask a little bit more about, you started traveling when you were 17 years old. How has the way that you funded your trips changed over the years? How did you fund your trips starting at 17, and how did you make it all the way through to 198?
Well, at 17, I was still in high school, so that was saved up money. So I'd also been working a little bit in a shop locally on the west coast to save up. And so after that, I was studying and not traveling that much, and then I got a job, and since then I spent all the money I made on traveling. And I've done that. I worked with Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation in Norway for around 20 or a little over 20 years, and made a decent money and spent pretty much everything on travel. Then early 2021, I quit my job to I don't know, to put all my eggs in the travel basket, so to speak, and to see if I can make a living permanently from writing books and doing speeches and podcasts and whatnot. And I'm still managing, so we'll see for how long. Hopefully, I'll be able to do this for quite some time. I rather enjoy, of course, the travel aspect, but also trying to maybe to inspire people in when it comes to travel or travel styles. Maybe get them some different insights than you would get typically by following I don't know, influencers or whatnot on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And trying hopefully to get people to think twice about travel overall and about ways of travel. I think it's important to let's say, well, to stimulate local economies, to maybe not stay in very fancy hotels that are owned by some rich people in the US or Germany or wherever, but rather stay in locally owned hotels and spend money in locally owned restaurants and all the rest of it. So hopefully I can contribute a bit when it comes to those kind of things and ways of travel and also where people travel. I mean, so many people they travel within this Western bubble I talked about earlier, and you don't really challenge yourself that much by doing that. You don't, we have, of course, there are differences in culture, but as opposed to visiting a third world country, one of the poorest countries in the world, and engaging with those who live there, and at least it takes a long time to actually understand properly how they're how people are living their lives and their backgrounds and all the rest of it, but at least getting a glimpse into how they're experiencing their lives in whichever country. So, and I think this is very valuable. It's about building bridges. It's about creating understanding between various countries and various people. And I think with the challenges we're looking at right now, with for instance, climate change, with conflict levels around the world, I think we really need to. We can't really leave this to politicians and business people alone. We have to help here, and we as normal people have to contribute here and make or create friendships across cultures and build those bridges as well.
So right now you mostly make your living from your books and speaking engagements. Is this one of your topics that you talk about a lot? Is climate change and the effects of it? What are most of your speaking engagements about, as well as your books?
Yeah, well, it varies. Some of them are about a given book or several of the books. It can be sometimes it's about climate change or sustainable travel. Sometimes they just come to me and give me a topic, or just please come and tell funny stories or whatnot. So it really depends on what the event organizer wants me to talk about. Sometimes it's professional. It's for travel insurance companies. It might be for travel agencies and so on. So it kind of depends. So I'm trying to tailor what I'm speaking about to whichever audience I'm looking at. And
Sure.
when it comes to climate change and such, of course, we as travelers are getting our fair share of criticism, and we should. But we're seeing with flight shame or plane shame, which is a Swedish term, flyskam, plane shame,
Mhm.
which we were hearing a lot about, or we've been hearing a lot about recently. It's a little bit too simplistic, I think, because then you're pointing fingers at one group and you're saying, oh, if you guys who travel so much, if you just stop traveling, we're going to save the planet. And that is that's way too easy. The flying is accounting for between 2% and 4% of all emissions. So even if we made it illegal to go by plane tomorrow, we would reduce at maximum 4%, and the global economy would suffer quite substantially, and a lot of people would lose their jobs. But if instead we manage to cut emissions from aviation by, I don't know, 20 or 40%, 50%. And if we do the same for every industry, well, then we're actually reducing emissions by between 20 and 50%. And I think that's where we need to have the focus. We need to think overall. We need to focus on every industry, and we can't just point fingers and try to shame people from from one group or from one industry, whatever. I don't think shaming ever worked throughout human history. So here, I think we really need to work together in between industries in order to fight climate change and hopefully resolve it.
Sure. Yeah, I've had that situation before because I have talked about global warming and climate change before in on my stories, and I've had a couple of people wrote me and say that I'm a hypocrite. And I understand where they're coming from, kind of what you were saying before. It is a small part of it. Let me ask, is there something that we can do more on an individual level from your research, from what you've seen, that people can do that might make an incremental change?
Yeah, I think we have to look we have to look at our lives overall, and we have to change our behaviors across the board, so to speak. So maybe we spend less money on fashion or clothing, and maybe we buy higher quality and use it longer, instead of buying cheap stuff that lasts for a very short amount of time. Instead of driving our own cars everywhere, use more public transport, use electrical vehicles when possible. When we travel, when we fly, whether we fly or go by train or boat or whatever, maybe stay longer in each place, use local transport, and travel more slowly. Also, use your money locally and help local businesses thrive instead of going to chain shops and chain restaurants and using chain hotels. Um, so I think, and also, use your wallet in order to vote, so to speak. When you go out, if you go to a hotel or restaurant, whether it's a chain or not, at least say so. Where is this produced from? Is it locally produced? Has it been been transported all over the world? So we have to make conscious decisions, and ask questions. If you're going out on a trip and you're seeing an animal show with elephants, for example, well, then you're probably not. Then you're putting money into hurting animals. The same thing with so-called voluntarism. A lot of people, they travel the world and they go to work in orphanages, for instance, or they go somewhere to teach English, um, and they actually pay money to do this, and they pay the organizers, or whoever is doing this, to stay in local hotels or whatever, their own hotels. So I mean, if you have to pay money to do a job, then you're doing something wrong. Then you're probably taking the job away from local people. That's one thing. The second thing, you're not educated to work at an orphanage, or to work as a teacher. So you're doing a lot of harm, and then you're just going to be there maybe for 2 weeks or 2 months, and that's doing a lot of harm to the kids. They're getting new teachers or new caretakers every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. Whereas you're sort of saying, oh, well, I'm helping the world. I'm now working at an orphanage, and you're making TikTok videos and Instagram photos, sort of bragging about how good you are. There's a lot of things here that we really need to look into, and where we should make conscious decisions and ask ourselves: Is this a good way? Should we really be doing this? So I think we should think twice. At every decision we make when it comes to travel, everything from mode of transport to kind of activities that we undertake, and to the places we stay, or the places we eat at.
Yeah, to touch on that a little bit, and there's been criticism, and I've always thought it was a little bit interesting when you see these influencers who will go up to a homeless person and record the whole interaction of giving them money, or taking them to a ball game, or do something special for somebody in need. And I've thought about it in both ways. I think in one hand, it's like they're highlighting the the good deeds that we can make in somebody's lives. But I also feel like it's such a shameless plug for themselves, as well as kind of exploiting these people. But yeah, it's very debatable on a lot of these actions that people do on TikTok or on Instagram. Can I ask you a bit about, you touched upon about some of your speaking engagements? Some people tell you to just tell funny stories. So
That's
what are
correct.
some of these funny stories that you've had, since you were the one to bring it up first anyway? So well, let's hear some of your funny travel stories.
Well, it's there are so many things that you experience when you travel. So it's there are lots to take from. For instance, when I was going to Afghanistan for the first time, I figured I should probably call my mom and tell her I'm going to Afghanistan. So I'm picking up the phone and say, "Hey, mom, what's up? And how are my siblings? And what's the weather like?" And blah blah blah. She's answering, and then I'm saying, and by the way, I'm going on holiday to Afghanistan tomorrow. Okay, she answers, and I'm, well, aren't you supposed to be a little bit worried, Mom? Gunnar, come on, I've got 6 other siblings or 6 other kids. She said. So it's sort of that really made me. I've told this story quite a few times, and it really cracks up people because uh, that was my mom's reaction, and I was like, okay, yeah, well, thanks a lot. And I asked her later, well, did you really mean that? And I said, no, that was kind of a joke and such. I don't know, you have other stories from. I don't know. You can almost pick a country, and you can come up with good stories. It's I was going into Turkmenistan, as we talked about earlier, with my brother and 2 friends, and we're coming from Iran, which is a dry country in more ways than one. And we've taken a taxi to the border. You cross over, and as I said, you need a guide there. And there's a big guy called Oleg. He's sort of 2 meters tall, a lot taller than me. So sort of shake hands upwards to him. And he's saying, "Welcome to Turkmenistan. Are you here for girls or for drink?" And I guess it's a legitimate question, and it probably says a lot
Yeah.
about Iranians that are coming to Turkmenistan. And I'm
Uh,
saying, well, I'm sure we're going to have some drinks, but we all have girlfriends at home. And his response is, so? So I was like, yeah, but Oleg, do you not believe in love? Love was invented by the French. They were too cheap to pay for prostitutes, is his response. So it's just like, wow.
what a
So that
character.
really, that sort of, we didn't really know what to respond to that one. So he kind of silenced us there. So
Yeah.
it's quite funny there and then. Of course, it's also saying something about the culture there and about women being used as prostitutes. So there's a deeper issue at bay here as well. But
Yeah.
it did crack us up at the time.
Well, Turkmenistan is sounding more and more appealing. I I have not been there, of course, but not for the prostitutes or drink, but it's more just it just sounds like such a like a lot of characters. It's such a unique country. What about some of your now you were kind of elusive in answering your favorite countries, which I understand it's a difficult question to answer. What are some of your favorite memories, and where do those memories take place?
Oh, there are again a lot of them. I don't know. It's not my favorite memory. It's quite a sad story, actually. That was in Afghanistan, and we were being shown around by 2 brothers in Herat, in the west. It's a small city, and really nice guys. We were getting in a really a good connection, and so after 2 days, they invite us to a wedding. So one of is their cousin who's getting married. And oh yeah, fantastic. So when is it? Yeah, it was 2 days later, and we sort of, okay, well, we need some nicer clothes or whatever, or at least shoes. I think so. We got some black shoes, and then what is, I don't know. One day later, and then they stopped talking about the wedding. And we're sort of, okay, but the wedding is tomorrow. So I was like, okay, so what time is it? And clearly they don't really want to talk about it anymore. So we're saying, okay, well, it's been cancelled or what's happening. And then they reluctantly tell us that the mother of the wife to be, she had been killed in a terror explosion. So of course the wedding was called off, and they were kind of ashamed that this had happened, so they didn't really want to tell us. But so it went from this really happy, inviting us to this wedding, wanted us to experience this, to sort of the total opposite, and deep sadness. This is not a favorite memory in any way, but it really stands out as well, and it shows how fast things can change in that matter. I was also in Kiribati in Oceania, and I was it was a Friday, and I'd been there for quite a few days, so met lots of local people there, and so they're asking me, so Gunnar, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, no, I don't have any plans. So, oh, do you want to come to a birthday party? I said, oh, so that sounds super cool. So whose birthday is it? It's Randall. Randall, I don't think I know him. So which birthday is it? It's the most important birthday of his life. I said, ooh, is it going to be 18 or 20, 21 or 50, 100 perhaps? Thinking that would be the most important birthday for us in the Western world. As a Gunner, we have among the highest rates of mortality in babies in Kiribati. He's going to be 1 year old. That he made it so far is definitely worth celebrating. So it's a totally different way of looking at it, and of course 1 year, managing in Kiribati with these high mortality rates, and it's a lot of diseases and whatnot. It made total sense. And I'm invited to this, and we go to the birthday party, and there are two or 300 guests. There are 7 pigs, being barbecued over fire. There are lobsters, there are fish, there is steak, there is pig, there is pork, there's sort of everything. Loads of vegetables, and there's a huge party, and you just realize that, wow, this is really important here. Of course, this the grandfather of Randall, he had a monopoly in Kiribati. He was the only one who could legally import beer, so he had a lot of money, which was how he was able to throw such a big party. But I mean, anyone with a baby that turns 1 will throw a party, even though it's much smaller than having 200 guests. So again, that's sort of it's a different perception, different way of looking at things. It's not about being 18 and being allowed to drive and drink, but it's actually about celebrating your first birthday, which you'll never remember yourself anyway, but to the rest of the community, it's very important.
Well, it's something that you had brought up earlier. I mean, all these experiences are very humbling, and you bring that back to your own country or your own experiences, and you realize that you have it so well. Can I ask about some of your most harrowing experiences traveling, most difficult experiences traveling? It couldn't have been easy to get to every country. What were some difficult situations that you might have been placed in?
I guess I've been relatively lucky. I haven't had, let's say, very nasty experiences. I was in Gabon once, and I was walking. It was around midnight. I was in Libreville, the capital, and I was walking on the main street, and suddenly 2 guys, they just jumped me and dragged me into a dark alleyway. And of course, I've been thinking about this might actually happen at some point. I'm likely to get robbed. And I've been sort of training myself. If that happens, I'm just going to give away everything, my phone, wallet, passport, whatever. It's not worth dying over, some pieces of paper and maybe
You
my
had your
phone.
baggage with you.
No, I didn't have any luggage. I'd been in a restaurant, so there's no
Okay.
luggage. So I was going on the way back to my hotel or hostel.
Mhm.
But the moment they jumped me, and they even had one of those taser guns that they were shooting at me with, and I couldn't sense any of that. So I don't think it was a very good taser gun.
This is
But I
where
became so furious. And so I started fighting back. And I managed to eventually, because they threw me down on the ground and ripped my shirt and everything. And eventually I managed to fight my way back up. And I managed to drag both of them and push them or pull them, whatever, out on the street again. I don't think I've ever had that much adrenaline in my body ever.
Mhm.
Even though I've trained myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do the hero approach or fight back. I'm just going to give away everything. But when it actually happened, I became so furious that I actually started fighting. And in the end, they managed to take my phone. It was an old banger of a phone, not worth much. They
Mhm.
didn't manage to take my passport, luckily, or my wallet or my money. But when they got back out into the lit street, one of them grabbed my phone and then they ran away. So it all happened so fast. I never had the time to really be scared, but that's probably the nearest I've been something potentially very dangerous. And it's really stupid. I should have done what I had planned to do. If they'd had a knife or a real gun, I probably would not have been sitting here today. So
Mhm.
but I think that's the only time I've really sort of felt that, okay, this could have gone much, much worse than it did.
Sure. What country was this in, or what
I
city?
did in
What country?
Gabon in West Africa,
Okay, I see.
Libreville, the capital there.
I see. Yeah, fortunately for me, I haven't, of course, I haven't been to as many countries as you've been, but I haven't had any situations like that. Typically, I don't wear any jewelry. I think most people who travel know not to wear any jewelry. I'll just bring a credit card and an ID, leave my passport at home. That in maybe like $20, $40. If I get robbed, then I'm okay. I lose one credit card. I have another credit card. I have my passport. I'll bring my California driver's license. Are there some tricks of the trade that you go with when you're traveling to avoid being a target?
Yeah, well, stuff like you're saying, but that's sort of more precautionary things to do to not be a target. Well, I don't know. I mentioned earlier I only travel with hand luggage. So I don't have I don't have a big suitcase that might potentially have loads of valuables in it. And also it makes me more flexible and it's faster to get away from a potentially dangerous situation. Other than that, I don't wear any jewelry or watches or necklaces, nothing like that. Um, I spend most of my money on travel, so I don't have any fancy designer clothing or very expensive clothing like that. So trying to. I mean, I'm in so many countries. I'm never going to be able to blend in anyway. Uh, so then it's more about just trying to downplay or not trying to appear as a filthy rich person or whatnot. I mean, people are going to assume you're rich anyway, since you're able to travel there, um, but at least try to sort of downplay it and then smile. Try to be nice to people, um, and maybe, of course, if it's night, it's always good to walk with someone, preferably local people. And again, taxis, or have somebody order them for you instead of picking them up on the street. I don't know. It's pretty much common sense things like that, really.
Sure. What about travel hacks for people out there who want to see more of the world? Is there something that they can do to see more countries and do it more efficiently at a lower cost?
Well, I think it's usually it's much cheaper to travel overland. So, I mean, typically you fly to one place and then you overland either by train or like big buses or small buses or shared taxis. That can typically save you a lot of money. You also get in touch with people, with local people that actually live there. So I think that's a good way. It's not, I wouldn't call it a hack, really. If you want to save money, I recommend to use, I don't know, Kayak or Skyscanner or one of those, and to search from various cities. For instance, coming from Europe, if you're going to go to South America, if you search from Oslo, you will probably get quite a high price. If you search from London or Amsterdam or Frankfurt or Warsaw or some other city in Europe, you will probably get a much lower price because all these airlines, they have campaigns in different countries at any given time. So if you spend that extra time and search for tickets from various countries, you will probably save quite a lot of money. And then instead of buying a through fare, you then buy a separate ticket to London or Warsaw, wherever you find the cheapest ticket to. Then I'd also recommend it to, instead of then, because then you might get quite a few hours to wait in between, pretty long layover. So maybe then just stay one night or 2 nights in Warsaw or London on the way out, and then you get a holiday in your holiday, and you get to spend see one more city perhaps, or go back to a city you've been to before. So I don't know if I would call it a travel hack, but that can save you some money, and it will also potentially let you see more places than you would otherwise do.
Sure. So, can I ask what's next for Gunnar Garfors? You've been to every country twice around. Is there going to be a third time? What else? What else do you want to accomplish in the travel spectrum?
Well, if there are any sponsors, potential sponsors out there that want to pay for my third round, be my guest. Get in touch, please.
Yes.
Right now, I'm working on a book about the equator and the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. So I'm traveling to those 21 countries. There are 13 countries around the equator and 8 countries around the Arctic Circle, and then Antarctica as well. So that's taking pretty much most of my time these days, time and resources. So this book is due out next year, so I'll be busy traveling for that one to those countries in question, probably for the next half year or so. What I'm going to do after that, I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but always thinking of new ideas, new good, hopefully good ideas for books. So the first one was about my journey to every country in the world. Then you have the 20 least visited countries. Now you have the equator and the Arctic Circle countries. So I don't know. We will see which one will be coming up next. But if you have any good ideas, please feel free to let me know.
Sure. So that first book, when you travel to every country in the world, how are you telling the story? Are you just talking about every country that you visited, or how is the narrative format of that first book?
Yeah, well, I didn't really want to do an A to Z kind of book or group it by continent or the timing of my visits to them. So I tried to group them in themed chapters. So there's one that deals with trouble with the police. There's one that's called island hopping. There is one that's called drinking and partying, and I think can't remember the exact names of the chapters. So I've sort of grouped every country in one of these themed chapters. One is called the Stan countries, the 7 stans. So I've tried to be a bit creative when it comes to grouping the chapters. Whether that's successful or not, I'm not sure. But at least I thought it kind of stood out from a lot of other travel books I'd read. So I think there are, I can't remember, 25 different chapters, and every country is in one out of those themed chapters.
Okay, nice. So where can listeners and watchers find more information about your books, about your travels? Can you point them in the direction to find out more about you?
Yeah, well, the easiest is probably to go to my website. It's garfors.com, so my last name.com. And then I'm also on Instagram. Primarily, it's probably the most important platform I'm on. And also there I'm Garfors or at Garfors on Instagram.
Okay, so I have one more question, and that is another way to ask what your favorite country is. But if you were not living in Oslo, where would you live?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I do like the sea, so I think it would have to be a country nearby the sea or a city nearby the sea. I'm a big I don't know. I'm quite intrigued by Asia. A big fan of both Japan and South Korea. Seoul is not really on the sea; it's on a river. So I don't know. Perhaps Seoul or Tokyo would be. Well, they would be among the top options for sure.
All
But at the
right.
same time, Africa is
Yeah.
stunning and really special. So, but which city in Africa, I'm not quite sure about.
Well, when I put this out, the headline will be Gunnar Garfors chooses Seoul, Korea as the best city and country in the world.
Well,
So
there you go. Yeah, it is an amazing city. Seoul is
yeah.
definitely one of my favorite
So
big cities. So
Romania will be disappointed. Well, the Romania will be they'll feel a little bit cheated if they see a headline like that. So I don't want to
well,
get you in trouble.
they had their
Yeah.
time, you know.
Well, Gunnar, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, thanks a lot for having me, Kevin.
Yeah.
It was a really nice talk. So
Good.
I appreciate you having me on your show.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you very much. And we'll follow your travels in garforce.com also. Thank you.
All right, take care,
Sure.
Kevin.
Remember, you can find more information about today's interview subject at pickmyadventure.com and discover more interviews. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on Pick My Adventure. I'm your host, Kevin Liu. You can find out more about me on Instagram at Pick My Adventure Traveler, where I let you pick my destinations and travel activities through polls.